I've never talked about this on my show before, so if you could tell me what you mean by liminal space.
In the metaphysical, historical, spiritual, old school understanding of a liminal space, it was these areas where the veil was thin and the spirit realm and the terrestrial realm could see and interact with one another.
What if there's this technology they're using to graft this reality with another onto a portal bridge where you're not existing on either plane where this activity happens? This episode is brought to you by merkmerch.com and merkelfilms.com. Merk Merch is where you can get your Merkel Media apparel, t-shirts, hoodies, all there at merkmerch.com. Also check out merkelfilms.com for our on-demand streaming service. We have independent creators coming to that platform soon, but we have 3 documentaries that we have shot on there right now for your viewing pleasure. Now today we have Vicki Joy Anderson coming in studio. She visited us here. Joel was here. We had a great conversation talking about portals, dreamscape warfare, the supernatural, and the intersection of faith and curiosity. Let's get to Vicki Joy Anderson right now. I'll tell you, like, I just, when Lindsay sent me that picture of Ben yesterday, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I go to his practices all the time, and seeing him kick that high, I mean, I've never seen him kick that high before.
Oh my goodness.
And he looks so serious and intent.
Yeah.
I was just like, man. And so he's kicking around the idea of doing other sports. And I told him, if you do other sports, you have to take a break from martial arts because, like, I don't have the time to do both sports or 3 sports plus your sister who's doing gymnastics. And it's just like, I'm not a soccer mom, you know? So, but yeah, you can just move this wherever you want. It goes
my nephew is right now. He's in martial arts, but he's trying to do everything else too.
Yeah.
So now he's like talking about, well, he just got finished playing soccer. Now he's about to play basketball. Then he's talking about football too. He's just a straight athlete. Dude, my sister comes home and he'll be in the backyard with his shirt off doing like one-hand push-ups and he's like 10.
Tough guy.
Hey, with everything going on out there, God bless him.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Vicki Joy Anderson, how are you?
This is so surreal.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Just logistical reasons. I just want you to know you can go up and down with this wherever you want the microphone. Let's just try to keep it around our face so that we can have good audio quality.
Sounds good.
But I just put these mic arms in yesterday, and so I'm hoping they work good. But what are you doing here in Tennessee?
I was at a wedding in Columbia,
Tennessee.
Yes.
Where's that at?
Oh man, don't ask me.
Is it like
it was
Nashville area?
It's pretty far west. Yes, it's very close to Nashville.
Okay,
maybe 40 minutes.
Gotcha.
Maybe.
Okay.
Don't correct me on that, anyone.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. A fellow Bigfoot aficionado, Chris Price, podcast host of Camp Herman, was getting married, and he's a dear friend. So we were hanging out with him for a few days.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. And you brought us these Bigfoot cookies.
Amazing. And
this is at the wedding?
They were at the wedding on the dessert table, and they are delicious.
I can't wait to eat it. I'm going to save it for after. We're Joel's here because tomorrow we're heading out of state to do a documentary, and so I'll eat this after we get back. That way, it's like a celebration.
Yes,
and
it's your elven cake.
Yeah, like
for energy.
Yeah.
3-day energy. Bigfoot cookie.
So, are you familiar with Trey Hudson?
I don't think so.
So, Joel, just like make a really weird noise if I'm not supposed to say something I'm about to say. Okay, just be like.
Make the most annoying noise.
I'll try. You probably do know at least of Project Meadow. You might have heard of that.
I might have.
So everything that I'm going to say, I think I originally heard on my show when he told me.
Okay.
So I think it's okay.
Okay.
And if it's not, I've already said it publicly recently, so I'm in trouble already.
Oh no!
But
here come the lawyers.
But basically, they discovered a meadow that has a lot of weird things happening in it.
Ooh.
A lot of weird things. And the one that is like the thing that I default to when I tell people is the portal that opened up on thermal. They legit have a video of it. Like we had Joel came down, Ward came down. I think Jack was there, and we had to sign NDAs to get debriefed on the location and be shown the footage. But like Joel was there with me. We saw the footage.
Oh man!
Of the Trey Hudson interview. He talked about having a square portal open up.
Square.
It was a square cubed portal that opened up on thermal image, and they basically were on a ridge. And he had a team of 2, I think it was, on a ridge, and they were watching the meadow. This thing they see on the thermal. So they start directing a team to go look at it. The team arrives at the location. They can't see with their naked eye. Mm-hmm. And then you literally see them on thermal walk across the threshold of this cube and they disappear. And they reported that when at that moment, the environment around them changed.
Yes.
And it was a clearly different thing. And it was 3 people on video, right?
Yeah, so it was 3 people that walked through, and you can see them because they're going in a straight line.
Yeah.
So you can see them disappear one by one.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't even the weird thing to me. I know that sounds crazy, but the weird thing to me, though, is they're panning with the thermal camera, and they're trying to figure out what happened to him. And they're trying to talk to him through walkie-talkie, but there's nothing at that point. Nothing's going through. But they do start coming back out again one by one. And what was the mind-blowing thing to me, though, when they panned over to the right, there's like 2 roughly 3-foot like entities on thermal watching them as they come out.
Yep.
Now, they never saw the entities when they came out, but on thermal, it's picked up. So that was wild. So Justin from Cryptids of the Corn, I was talking to him because we had that what was it? The Bigfoot conference that we were all at. And he's heard the story a million times. And I told him, I was like, I've seen the footage now. It's legit. Yeah. Like, it's not fake. They're not lying. I've actually seen the real thing. And it's legit. And Justin's like, because that's all everybody talks about in the community. Like, are they lying? Like, are they just making it up?
No.
I'm like, no.
No, they're
and
not.
that wasn't the only thing they showed us. It was like an hour and a half presentation of all these different things they found in that meadow over a period of time. They've been doing this research, and they wanted us to see all this. So we knew what we were getting into before we go to this undisclosed location and shoot this film. And again, the cube portal, you think that would be the most exciting thing for me. It wasn't. It was like the entities watching them come in and out of this cube.
They're like, we're waiting for them to leave so we can get back on our ship.
Yeah. Right.
They're like, dang it, they found it. How'd they find it? Oh, we forgot to do the thermal option.
Well, I'm just thinking now, if this gets out with the community that does research, I'm going to guess that National Forests will start banning thermal cameras.
That's a great observation. I wonder if that would be crazy. You're not going to ban my thermal. No,
I know.
I'll smuggle that thing in like I'm smuggling drugs.
Yeah. So it just falls in place with what we've heard with the Politis research. Mm-hmm. Because these people talk about how the person right in front of them, right in back of them, they're gone. And then the people that do come back from these experiences will talk about how the whole forest goes silent.
Yes.
Which, when you said changed in atmosphere, that's what that made me think of.
So I was in Utah. I think it was in the beginning of September, the Phenomenon, and Politis was there speaking. Oh. And in his presentation, I don't remember the details per usual. I forget a lot of things. But in the presentation, he talked about one case where a guy I think it was a hunter, had come up on a metallic cube looking UFO, I think it was. And I mentioned to him about Trey's situation, and he knows Trey too. And we talked about that a little bit. But this whole cube thing is not as maybe not as rare as what we would think, Yeah. And I know Politis says that in one of his books, he talks about how if if you notice things are going sideways, I can't remember what the trigger event was that he was referring to, but maybe it was when the forest goes silent. He says to sit down if you're with somebody. If not, just sit down, maybe against a tree. But he said, if you're with somebody, sit down back to back and wait it out. He said, stop moving. Don't move. And I think it has a lot to do with the idea that, people like for instance, we're going to the meadow. Do I think that we're going to find a portal? Probably not, but I think that these portal things are not fixed geographically. And so if this is something to do with people accidentally slipping realms, I think the best advice is to sit still, because you don't know exactly where it's at. And if it's a moving thing, just sit and wait it out,
I'm not sitting.
Yeah.
I know you're not sitting.
I'm running right to it.
Joel's like, I hear a buzzing. Where is the buzzing? Where's the buzzing?
What I would be really interested to know, and it would take a couple months because I don't think it would happen immediately. I would like to talk to Trey and ask what sort of, if any, spiritual attachments might have come with that experience.
So, for sure, that's an absolute fact. I mean, he broke it down when he had the debrief with us that several members have had hitchhikers, have had all kinds of either attacks or weird things happening around their homes, not in the area that they came from, but they're bringing stuff back with them. So that's for sure thing. And I don't know how much we can talk about that piece of it.
I'm sitting here wondering, I can't remember, is he giving us permission to put the cube in the documentary?
I don't know about that, because I know they've kept that under wraps for a long time. That'll probably be something we have to talk to him about to see if that's something we can show. Yeah, because I know that they've been real careful with that, because you're always going to have your detractors that come out and say that it was CGI or they made it up. That's always going to happen in this community. But again, he's not. Here's my opinion on the CGI thing for that particular footage. Why would they go to the effort to spend that kind of money?
That's a funny thing, though.
To do it just for a handful of people to see.
Here's the thing. So anybody who says that it's CGI, it's not, because it's such crappy footage. It's not like high def 4K imagery or anything like that. It is a black and white thermal image of this cube, and it's just, if you're gonna fake something, you're gonna make it. I don't want to. You know what I mean? I don't know how far I can go, but I just want to say, you would do it different than what I saw. You would do it different than what I saw.
I just think if you're spending the money to make a fake video, you're going to put it out there and try to make money off of it, which they're not trying to do. And they're very protective of the area, because they really only want seasoned researchers out there and people that are serious about what they're doing. Because one thing is, they've had so many run-ins with so many different types of phenomena. It's not one kind of phenomena. Like, they've had everything from Bigfoot to other entities to UFOs to portals, all that in one area, which is just this really high strangeness area that they've run up on. So I get why that they want to keep things under wraps for a point, but at the same time, maybe there's a chance that we can put that particular footage in the film, because I do feel like that with the reach that we have with the films, that it would be able to put that on the map as far as what happened there.
I think when I talked to him initially on the show, afterwards, when we were talking, he was in works with doing a documentary about the area and stuff for a while. And things were always falling through. So I think part of the whole documentary thing is that he does want to share it, but he wants it to be done the right way. And so I don't know. That's a Ward thing. Ward's doing the production on this, so I have no idea. But
so has anyone done the research by way of location wise? Is it on the 33 parallel, or is there anything unusual about the location or the history of the area?
There's some stuff going on there. We just can't talk about it.
Okay.
But
I don't know.
Sad trombone.
And I can hear people right now going crazy on the comments. He did it again. Of course, keeping it hidden.
Man.
I'm keeping it hidden because I try to be. I try to hold up my end when it comes to people, and so Trey made certain requests, and that's that.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
I'm going to keep it secret forever. You're never going to hear it. Never telling you.
This would go a long way, Tony, in helping the community be taken serious.
This would go a long way to fuel our anger. You're doing a great job.
With Tony Merkel.
Oh man, what do you think about the whole portal thing, Vicki? Because hey guys, real quick, if you want to join me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email, contact@theconfessionalspodcast.com. And if you want more shows on a weekly basis, hit the join button here on YouTube or the link in the description to get access to extra episodes. So I've definitely changed over the last 2 years with this stuff. So, I mean, when the portal talk and everything really started getting heavy on the show for certain reasons, I got, and this might be the first time I'm saying this and putting it out there, but I got infatuated with portals, and it got unhealthy in my mind. And I started kind of like, I don't know. I felt like some of my actions and the way I was thinking about it and stuff was irresponsible. And so I no longer have this infatuation with portals where it's like, oh my gosh, a portal. It's like, for me, it's like, yeah, they're real, and they're doorways to other realms. And do I get excited about the door that we walk through to get in the studio? No. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, I think it was like the shock of like, holy crap, like this is actually real, you know? And the more I've kind of looked at them and heard about them and stuff, the less I look at them with an infatuation, but more of it's a reality of the situation. They are actively popping up, and it's just like, I also think that with what we are doing, like me, Joel, Ward, like we all feel very strongly that we're very specifically called to show the world when we can that the supernatural realm exists.
Yes.
And so it's like, I'm not backing away from the topic of portals. It's just my mentality has changed so much about it. Like I used to be like gung ho, like just like, so tell me about portals. Well, I have a hat man. Tell me where the portal is, sucker. Tell me now.
How did he get in your room? So I'm so glad you brought this up because, well, first of all, let me backtrack a second. I'm so glad that you're that self-aware because as Christians, especially, there is a fine line between a calling into exposing the deeds of the devil and intrigue and titillation over the dark side. Because we are all naturally curious about the Nephilim and the demon world and the spirit realm. And sometimes we don't know when we've tripped over that line. And I think that for those of us that are doing this long term and we're called into this type of research, we have to constantly be checking ourselves. Have I gone over that line? Am I going too far? We have to constantly make sure that all of our research is pointing back to the glory of God, the exposing of the deeds of the devil, setting captives free. And we just have to be constantly mindful of that. Now, with that said, my research, I don't use the word portal, but a massive crux of my research has been thresholds, which is the same sort of thing. We're talking about liminal spaces. And so you guys are in the physical. You guys are there, doing the super cool guy stuff that I wish I could do. I wish I could be out there in the woods, with the pew-pews. But I have been relegated to the study and doing the research, and I'm taking it more from a biblical and theological approach into the realms of spiritual warfare and how the Christians who are perishing for lack of knowledge, one of the reasons they're going to perish for lack of knowledge is because of their inability to stomach the concept that the Bible is radically supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't see that, and anytime a Christian starts pointing it out, you instantly go to the knee-jerk fear reaction of you're a witch, you're new age, you're in the occult, you're an operative. If you can't grasp the supernatural nature of God and the things that he was doing all over the Old Testament and today, you're going to be afraid of God rather than seeing the glory in it.
That's when you said that, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, if you're afraid of the supernatural aspect of God, it probably inhibits your ability to draw near to him to a certain extent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know personally that's an area where I'm often misunderstood. The reason I delve into some of this stuff, like, okay, he parted the Red Sea. I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But how? What in the quantum realm, what was going on? Because we can talk as Christians in very generic terms about the insurpassable power of God. But when you start to try to get to the nitty-gritty of how he is implementing that power and the aspects of his own creation that he may have even put in place for the very reason of that it facilitates his power being manifested in this physical realm, then all of a sudden that's magic or that's occult or that's new age. No, he created frequency. He created all of these sound waves and the color spectrum. And so what if I'll take the rainbow for an example. Did he just get a big paintbrush and paint something in the sky and, Jesus is glitter and unicorns and he's just a nice guy? Or could a scientist 10 times more brilliant than me sit down and give you an absolute scientific rundown of how that rainbow's appearing? Just because science can explain it doesn't mean we're taking away from the fact that that was a seal of a covenant. It was something very spiritual. It was an interaction. It was a theophany, if you will. God came down in some sense and made a covenant with mankind. And so I just don't understand that when we don't all love God the same way. Some people, they feel the closest to him when they're in church and there's a whole bunch of music playing at loud volumes and they just get overcome with emotion and the tears roll down. There's other people where the way they get all of the chill bumps and the thrills and the joy and the tears is when God comes in and interacts with their mind. And when they can see the power of God that way, it is mind-blowingly emotional. And so I see this concept in scripture that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I'll tell you a little story. I was working at a church once, and the children's program, they were having a vacation Bible school. And so all the kids got a shirt, and it had that verse written on it. And it said, love God with your heart, soul, and strength. And there would have been room to have put 2 more words on that t-shirt. And it's like, man, that's the one you're omitting. Love God with all of your feelings and emotions, but check your brain at the door. And so when it comes to these portals, these thresholds, I could not believe, as I was researching sleep paralysis of all things, that the linchpin of discovering what that was, because you always say, well, what are they imitating? Because all they can do is mock and copy God. What are they imitating? And realizing that whole sleep paralysis experience, these astral abductions, everything, these are an invitation of entities from the heavenly places, the high places, the epiphanios of Ephesians 6:12. It's a liminal space. It's a crossing over one way or the other over these thresholds.
You've mentioned that twice now, and I've never talked about this on my show before. So if you could, just for the audience sake, and for my sake, because I have a general idea, but if you could tell me what you mean by liminal space.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because another point I wanted to make is, of course, they are trying to change the meaning of that phrase now.
Really?
Now, okay, in the back rooms on the internet, they, a liminal space, if you ask a young person what it is, it's these back rooms or it's places that should not be abandoned that are now abandoned. So if you go into an old shopping mall from the 1980s, it's been closed, or an old movie theater and it's empty and you get that eerie feeling because it should be filled with people. They're now saying that that's a liminal space. But in the metaphysical, historical, spiritual, old school understanding of a liminal space, it was these areas where the veil was thin and the spirit realm and the terrestrial realm could see and interact with one another. And so you see, like, it can be these portals, it can be wells, doorways, things like that. And this is why most people, a lot of people, I know there's always statistical outliers. There's always that one guy in the class. What about this? Statistically, a lot of people report during these sleep paralysis experiences, a shadow man or an entity at the bedroom door. And in fact, if you just do a Google image search and you put in sleep paralysis shadow man, the artwork, like drawings and paintings, like the artists typically want to put that shadow man at the bedroom door within the door frame. That is extremely spiritual. And it goes all the way back into antiquity. In fact, threshold covenants were in place until the middle to the end of the 1800s. It has not really fallen out of use all that long ago. But the way things were originally set up when we were an agrarian society, we didn't have all these Nephilim cities that everybody was trying to gather us into. You would have your plot of land, you'd have your home. And if we talked about this a little bit on our last episode, Tony, like if you were the patriarch of that home, you were the high priest of your home. Your home was considered your place of worship because we didn't have cities where everybody gathered. The threshold was the altar where sacrifices of praise or whatever were offered to the deity of that house. And we see threshold stuff all over in the Old Testament. We see, I don't want to list all of them. Once you understand this, you will never read the Old Testament again, ever the same way. For example, this is my favorite. You've got all of the men grumbling against God, but then there's this detail. Every man stood in his doorway. It was a double offense to God. It wasn't just that they were complaining because they were a bunch of whiners. The high priests of every household stood in the threshold at the altar where they worshiped their God and called into question what his plan was. And so it was a double offense because they were actually questioning his will and his plan. And so I don't even know what direction to go with this now, Tony, so I'll let you kind of guide. But these thresholds they are still altars. It doesn't matter if we've forgotten this information because the spirit realm is so legalistic. They love the fact, they are banking on the fact that we have fallen into ignorance and do not understand that when things cross over our threshold into our home, we have given them invitation and we are now in covenant with them.
So a couple of things that you're talking about. First, on the liminal spaces. So I do think there is a representation of liminal spaces in today's lingo that connects the modern mind to the spiritual realm. And I do agree with you that they're trying to change the meaning of liminal spaces, but I do think there is a format, though, that's playing with both, and it is with technology.
Yes,
so when you want to look at something like Google Maps now, people find liminal spaces when they are digging deep into the map. They'll just find these weird rooms that don't exist in real life. and there'll be weird things in these rooms.
On Google Maps?
Absolutely. So there, you can actually just type in liminal spaces in Google Maps and you'll go down a whole Reddit rabbit hole of like all these different rooms that people are finding with weird things in them.
When you say room, you mean like on the screen, like it's a box that
looks like a room.
It looks like a room on satellite image?
Yeah. Like you're going all the way in, like you're zooming as far as you can in, and you may find a building or something, and the building may exist, but you may go through a window or something and it'll take you to a whole nother place that's not in reality.
Really?
But it's in this false reality.
It's in the tech.
That's interesting. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't specifically heard of people going into Google Images and doing it. Doesn't surprise me because I've heard of aspects of it, but yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I just ran across that about 6 months ago, at least some of the weirder aspects of it where people are, there's some people that just, that's all they do all day is look at Google Maps and find all this weird stuff. And obviously there's stuff that's blocked out that we're not allowed to see, but this is one of those weird ones where they'll go to certain areas and it might be an island or something. You go to an island, you might find like a weird cavern or something. You go in the cavern, then all of a sudden it's like a weird room with just odd chairs in there, or there may be something that looks similar to an entity just sitting in the room when you go in there. So it's very weird. And again, you can go down a Reddit rabbit hole. There's a bunch of pictures that people have taken screenshots of while they're in there. And I think, though, that's that tie into the connection with the entities and technology and AI.
Like they're opening the threshold for viewing pleasure?
Through AI or through whatever program you're working with, right? And I don't know if every case is that, but I can say some of the weirder ones that I've seen just seemed off and odd.
Yeah.
And if it's not an entity, it's somebody that's creating it that's trying to give you the illusion of that going on too. So you've kind of got that aspect going on as well. I also want to talk about what you said about Christians and the paranormal or the supernatural. And one book that comes to mind is Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic. And I was talking to Tony about this yesterday when we were in the tool store. Home Depot. Yeah.
Let's make it easy for Joel. Home Depot.
I can't talk today. We were in there and I started talking to him about how that Christians always demonize every single thing that's going on in the supernatural. And somehow good and God does not exist. Somehow there's not good angels or good Elohim or good entities. It just becomes this narrative that anything that's mystical is evil. And it brought to mind a story that Diana Pasulka was talking about, because the entire book's built around the idea that there are geniuses throughout all parts of history that have in some way connected to some sort of off-world entities that help progress technology. And this has happened for a long time. Now, the odd thing was we generally think of that as pretty bad, right? Especially if the things that are being created are negative, or if it's helping someone achieve some status on this world, which I don't disagree with that, right? But there was a part of it that she said that made some interesting sense. She was talking about the creative mind, people that are really creative and how they get into a zone and they don't really realize what they're doing. And I can speak specifically to that. I know when I write music, I was joking with him because people ask me, how long does it take you to write a song? And I don't really think about it, but when I tell them, a lot of people are shocked at how short of an amount of time it takes me to do a song. It's anywhere from 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half, generally speaking. Like that's around the time frame that it takes me to put together an entire song, hook, verses, whatever. And again, you can attribute some of that to I've done it for 20 years. So obviously when you've been honing a skill, you get better and better. But I can say sometimes I feel like I'm just in like a zone and I don't even really realize that I'm doing what I'm doing until it's done. And I don't even think about it. So one thing she said was, because her research wasn't just hinged one way, right? She's a professor of religious studies, and she's studying the UFO phenomenon. That's kind of the whole basis of the book. And one of the things she talked about was she always tries to get both sides of it so she can compare. So yeah, she had these guys who are connecting with entities. They don't believe in God, really. It's more of an extraterrestrial type of phenomena to them. But she grew up in the church, and she started asking people who wrote music that's Christian music and were doing things that were godly. And they had the same type of phenomena. It's almost like they felt like something was being downloaded, or they were connecting to some other presence. And that really struck a nerve in my mind, because I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't mean that they're connecting to something negative because they're connecting to something that's off-world or supernatural. It just means they're connecting to the other side of it. There's two sides to it. So why are Christians so scared to connect to the supernatural? It's one thing to try to connect to the supernatural because it's out of hubris, or it's out of a desire to, like you just said earlier, about how people want to do something because they want to feed this need to know everything or become all-knowing on something. I don't think that's necessarily the case, though, when you're doing it from a pure heart and this happens naturally. I think that, yes, if you are a Christian and you are creative, you probably are receiving some sort of inspiration from another realm, a godly realm. Why are we always trying to dichotomize that part of it?
Well, I feel like I feel like, so you're saying like godly realm, and what I think the default would be is, okay, so that's the Holy Spirit speaking to you. And when somebody says it's that when you go outside the realm of the Holy Spirit giving you the download and speaking to you, that's what makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, but here's my question though, Tony. We know our connection to God, and we don't have to broker between anyone to get to him. No man, no entity, nothing. We can get directly to God. Right. But that doesn't mean that God didn't set up a hierarchy within this hidden realm or unseen realm, as Michael Heiser would talk about, that there are entities that are messengers to help mankind. We see it all through the Bible. Angels have been helping men for a long time. Why would it be any different now? Maybe it just operates in a different manner. Instead of them showing up physically, maybe that is what happens with this download or whatever else when we're connecting to the godly realm.
Yeah.
Why do we have to say that it's just one thing? We know nothing about that realm.
But it's because the culture has shaped people for hundreds of years like that in the Western society. There is no room for the supernatural. That's been the thing that we've been hammering on this show for years now. Like the church has moved the supernatural out of the church. They brought the secular culture into the church, and there's no room for theological understanding when it comes to the supernatural realm and the average church attendee. It is 3 points on how to live better for Jesus this week, which I'm not saying is a bad idea. It's not bad to contemplate how can I live for Christ better this week, but it's always cupcakes. It is not supernatural realm driven. It is not giving people meat of how complex their personal existence is in the cosmos. It's just not that. And so when people are presented with this information, I think that's why they get so taken back, because it takes them away from this thing that they've been built into, and now you're presenting things to them that, especially as a guy on the internet, or lady on the internet, it's like, who are you? I have a relationship with my pastor at church, and I know that that's the church I got saved in. And that's the church that I go to every Sunday. I worship the Lord, and I feel like my life is going great spiritually right now. And now all of a sudden you're throwing me these curveballs. Like who are you? Who are you? Like you're over here telling me all this stuff that none of the people that I trust spiritually in my life are telling me. And so I think that's where that aggression comes in, because it's just like, I don't understand it. It's scaring me. and I'm out.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's even offensive to me because I don't understand it, And it's these new concepts that, I don't even know if they're I guess they're new still. They're not new, but like being reintroduced to the culture of the theological culture, I guess. It's still new. I mean, like I know, I had gotten a text message from, this was years ago before I moved down here, a guy that I used to go to church with, and he sent me a link to that Sunday sermon, and it was about the pastor was talking about why it's ridiculous that people are looking into this whole Book of Enoch thing and all this stuff, like, and it's like, and there was accusations put into that sermon of how the Book of Enoch is not scripture. It shouldn't be looked at scripture. And I said to him, I said, pump the brakes. I'm not saying it's scripture. Nobody's like, maybe some people, I know some people are, they're like, why isn't it scripture? I'm not saying it's scripture. I'm saying the writers of the Bible read it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know the Book of Enoch was held as a credible source of information in the household that Jesus grew up in.
Book of Jasher as well. Talked about in the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah, these are books that the ones who wrote the Bible, we know that they read it. We know that Jesus was raised in a household where the Book of Enoch was talked about. It's clear. And so it's like, if that's the case, then we can look at these things with understanding that I'm going to look at this just like I would look at a Michael Heiser book, like I would look at I'm trying to think of another theological person that does commentary, but like any kind of commentary, we can look at it that way, and to help us further understand things. And what is that further understanding? It's the spiritual realm, and that's what's making people scared, because it's just like, listen, man, I just got comfortable with this idea of God stuff yesterday, and I think that there's churches out there that are geared and meant for specific types of people. And I don't think I used to have a problem with that. Like I used to be like, if you're not talking about this stuff, you're falling short. I think that there's some churches out there that are designed and that are divinely designed to bring in a harvest. So there's churches out there that are meant for people as more of an evangelistic church. Then there's churches out there that are geared towards, let's take these people on these baby steps on how to grow in Christ. And then there's churches out there that are meant for the weirdos like us that don't like, let's go deep on this, but like, you can't take people off the street and put them into that environment right away when they just realized that God was real yesterday.
Yeah.
Because when scripture was written, right? Like they lived in a society where the supernatural realm was just built into culture. They understood it. It's not like that anymore. And so I just feel like there's different types of churches for different stages of people's walk.
I love what you just said. And I want to say that you and I talked about this yesterday too, but I was talking about Michael Heiser. And one of the things that he brought up was the sad reality of the modern church. They read the Bible in modern Christian terms. They don't read it as the ancient writers wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's been told to us is, oh, they didn't really know about the world. They didn't really know what was going on. That was just their way of trying to explain it. Classic what they say about all mythologies, which, by the way, I think almost, if not all mythologies are more than mythology. I think that these gods roamed the world. And I think all of these different religions have a basis in reality. I think these gods perpetuated a godhood in front of them. These Elohim, they perpetuated a godhood in front of these people in all of these different cultures. So when they're telling you what they saw these things. Mm-hmm. They may have been deceived into thinking that these gods were the upper tier pantheon of gods, or they were above Yahweh, which that's a whole nother Gnostic rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, I think they all have basis in truth. And I just think that we have been so conditioned to think that not only the modern Christian, but just the modern world thinks that we're so much more intelligent and smarter and advanced than people were in the past. Like they're just making it up that they saw these things and what they saw really wasn't what they saw. Well, why are they so specific? Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not just touting
repeatable throughout the world.
And I'm
like,
not.
This is something that they not just one group of people saw. This group of people saw something, and then they're describing the same thing over here, a separate group of people that didn't interact.
Right. Yeah. And I think that not just the Bible, but all of these other ancient texts have validity to them. And I think that to discredit these other texts, like the book of Enoch, book of Jasher, any of these Jubilees, any of these other extra-canonical texts, plus the Sumerian Ugaritic text, plus the Babylonian text, plus the Akkadian text, all of these texts have weight and validity to them. And when we're able to read all of them together, we get a clearer view of what was going on in the past, and it helps us understand what's happening now. So Vicki was on my show recently, and we did a killer.
Oh, here he goes, plugging away. Go ahead. What's the name of your podcast?
Free the Rabbits podcast.
Hey, just get the name of my book in here.
Yeah, feel free.
So Vicki was on recently, and we did a joint research project on the redemption of Judas, which I'd say 90% of the people loved it. There was that 10% that just went 0 to 60 and did exactly what you said they were going to do, didn't listen to the episode at all, saw the headline and just started typing, which most people do. When they don't agree with a headline, they don't even take the time to listen to what's being said. But regardless of those people, we did an episode about the redemption of Judas and how that biblically it works within the confines of the Bible. You know, we didn't even go extra canonical at all, I don't think. No. I think we went specifically about how that Judas, from all indications, looked like he was probably redeemed in the end. And this goes back to understanding
blasphemy,
understanding how in ancient times that the Hebrews operated when it comes to redeeming. Mm-hmm. It's different than we operate now. We have that line directly to God. We had Jesus come and die for our sins, rose again, and brokered that deal for us. But I'm just saying all that to say that that is an instance of not understanding how things were done in the past, how they saw things in the past. And for us to sit there and say that these people are lying in this book, that's what you're saying. It's blasphemy when you say that these people didn't know what they were talking about. At that point, then you don't believe the word of God. You don't believe it. Oh, that's just them, colorful language.
Mm. Well, and I think we need to take a step back, and instead of our fruitful discourse together as believers, instead of it being a competition and who's got more letters after their name and who went to seminary and who's smarter or who's going to win the argument, who's got the more articulate, vocabulary, we have to get to the crux of why we get so upset when someone rubs into our paradigm. Because the thing with the Judas, and I'm not going to rehash our points here. You can go and listen to it if you're interested. It was a great discussion. And to your point and to Heiser's point, our inability in the 21st century to read the text and have the culture, the context, the history, the language, and the geography intact, it's almost impossible apart from the Holy Spirit at this point. We really do need to set our culture aside. But here's the deal. And this is why the Judas question was so important to me and why I wanted to do the podcast. I do not know if Judas is in heaven or not. I have never read the Lamb's Book of Life. If I could check it out of the library, I'd be there in a hot minute looking for it, right? But here's the deal. I'm not God. I do not know where he splices his mercy and his judgment and who's going to be in heaven and who's not. But to the Christians who are unhinged over that and their knee-jerk reaction is, no, he has to burn in hell. What's important about that is, why are we as Christians who are saved by grace, who have done things every bit as stupid and ignorant as what Judas did. You know, he wanted Jesus to overthrow Rome. He wanted maybe a position of power in that kingdom. He wanted finances to come his way. I don't see tons of difference between the things in Judas's heart and what I've heard a lot of patriots and Christians and Republicans talking about the last month or two. What do we want the leader of our country to do for us? We want control back.
Revenge.
Revenge. We want our economy back. We want all the same things Judas did. Our hearts, they haven't changed in 2,000 years. We want stability. We want financial stability. We want our families to be safe. We want a leader who's righteous. We want to feel safe. We don't want war. We don't want government ruling over us and our taxes and all this. So we have the hearts of Judas. So my point in all of this is, why don't we, as sinners who have had the same grace extended to us, why are we rooting for the eternal damnation of a fellow sinner? And wouldn't it make God look so full of love and mercy? And wouldn't it give us hope maybe for some of the people that we love who have died, who we just wrote off and said they've got to be in hell because I never witnessed them praying a prayer? Like, wouldn't that expand your joy to know that the guy that we just assume Jesus cut off forever, if we knew Jesus even had mercy for him, wouldn't that increase our joy? Wouldn't that expand our concept of mercy and salvation? So why are Christians white knuckling onto this? Why is it a comfort to you if I just continue to assure you that Jesus is going to just let people that he was friends with and walked with just burn in hell forever? That doesn't make...
It's Christian elitism. And I've been preaching this on my show since I started it. It's this idea that we have to feel like we're better than other people as Christians. And we have to stand on this, Mount Hermon of our own making and sit there and judge people from the top. And it's very sad. Christians are some of the worst when it comes to that. And I know Tony and I talked about this recently a couple of weeks ago. And I think, I can handle when people attack me personally. Generally, I find it kind of funny. But when certain people attack me over Christian values or think I should be tap dancing for them and telling them that this is what I did in the past that's wrong. Here, let me show you. That's not for me to do. That's between me and God, and my actions will show you over a period of time that I mean business. The problem I have is that Christians in general, I'm going to say all of them by any stretch, because I know a ton of great ones, but the culture that's been created on Christianity now is we need to make them pay. We need to make them burn. And it makes them feel good to stand above someone else and feel that way, because I think a lot of them are trying to run from maybe sin in their own lives, maybe sin from their past, and they want to separate themselves away from sin. We'll never separate ourselves away from sin as far as us acting on sin. It's just a part of life. We're going to sin, but what we can do, the separation, is taking Jesus as our Lord and Savior. That separates us from sin for eternity. That puts us in the Lamb's Book of Life to where we're protected. I just don't understand why we don't want people to be saved, to be a part of God's kingdom. We should want everyone to be that way. Even those politicians that we can't stand, we should want them to find their path to God. Because if they did, they would be in a position to help people more than some of us.
It's living in the understanding of the grace that was extended to you at one point. Like if you can come back to that, all of a sudden the grace that you remember experiencing, if you can come back to that first love, I guess, the more you can comprehend your enemy having that grace extended to as well. Let me make a hard turn here because I wanted to talk to you about some other things too. So yesterday, I had a lady on the show. I don't know when it will air compared to when this will air, but I talked to her yesterday, and she had a really weird experience that I wanted to bring up to you because, well, first of all, the experience is weird. And then what followed, I thought you might have some thoughts on. So 20 years ago, she's 41 now. 20 years ago, she was in the Bay Area and she was in the rave scene. She was raised with her grandmother who was some kind of missionary. But she was in the rave thing, and her two other girls and one guy went, and they were somewhere and they didn't feel comfortable or something. They left, but it was early in the night, so they didn't want to just go home, especially since they drove like an hour or two, and they wound up going to a body of water, and they had this really trippy experience that it was like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. You know, it was like jam packing like 5 of my episodes into one night. She said that when they were driving there, she noticed that everything, like the roads were not, there was nobody on the roads. Like it was just them, which to me was a sign of something happening. And then when they're there, they're looking at the water, they saw what they thought was a star in the sky until it went down into the water. And they saw 4 of these, what she's calling ships or crafts, come up to them in the water. And she's like, it shouldn't have been possible. She said these things were like the size of a football field, and they come up to the shoreline, but they were in the water, and the water wasn't that deep. And she's like, it was bizarre. And then they started hearing this like buzzing sound, and I think they heard the buzzing sound as they were approaching the water. They felt the ground shaking at one point. Then these 4 guys show up, and she said they looked exactly the same. They all looked exactly the same. And they were like, and she said they were having this communication with these guys. And I asked her if she remembers actually talking to them. And she's like, I don't think I do remember talking to them. I think it was telepathic. And her friends were having conversations with them as well. She said that her friends, when she looked at her friends, their heads were thrown back and their eyes rolled back in their head. And she's having this conversation with this one man, but her friends then recall as well having conversations with these guys. And so it was like they all were seeing each other doing what each other were doing with their heads rolled back, but their experience was more active. And then she said there was this reptilian looking thing standing off to the side, and these men were saying, you shouldn't be here. We don't know how you got here. We do things to prevent people from getting here. You need to leave. It's not safe for you right now. He's hunting. And started talking about, I think the reptilian was hunting, and he hunts for a certain blood type. And she's like, wasn't very familiar with my show, because like a couple times I had to ask her, like, how familiar are you with the show? Because I'm about to get real crazy with you. You know, like I'm about to say some really weird things, you know, but you've said weird things to me. So I'm assuming you're going to be okay with it. And so she starts talking to me about how they're telling them that they're in danger. And this was like an hour and a half conversation. But then she said that she doesn't remember leaving. They all just woke up in their beds. And then the one friend wound up in a mental institution. The other one, seemingly out of nowhere, became suicidal and killed himself. And I forget what I don't know if anything ever happened to the other person, but she said that shortly after that, they were all real tight, and they just stopped talking to each other. And she's like, we just out of the blue just stopped communicating with each other. And I don't even know where they're at. I've tried finding them. I don't know where they're at. But then she says that after this, and she didn't have much detail because I don't think she even really considered this to be a connecting thing. She said after this experience, she started having these dreams. And she said that there's this one dream where there was this being that was wearing she called it a burqa. And so I don't know if it was actually a burqa or if it was what has been described to me as like an entity or even, I think, person in the astral wearing some kind of cloak, like a black cloak. But she said it was a burqa. And this thing had a sword and it glowed orange. And it was called the Soul Collector. And I was like, I have an episode called Soul Trappers, ma'am. And I've been having people randomly say things that have been like pointing towards that idea. I had Fringe on the show not too long ago who specifically talks about this. She's like, they have whatever these things are in these other realms, they have technology. And one of the technologies they have is, she's like, they are doing something with human souls. And then this lady's like, and I asked her for more details. I don't have any more details. That's just that's all she saw. But then, like, to kind of bring this into, because this is everything I just said was spawned by this conversation that we just came from, because I was sitting here thinking, how do we get from portals to biblical conversation? And just like that, this Bible verse popped in my head that brought me into this. And I was like, so full circle. But Ezekiel 13:18, I think it is, says that it's talking about, I guess, female prophets that were false prophets. And it says how they were making charms that they wore as bands on their wrist, that magical charms that wore as bands on their wrist for hunting souls. And it's like God was speaking, saying, how long are you going to hunt the souls of my people and preserve your own, or something like that? I forget what it is. And in my mind, I'm like looking at it and I'm reading it, and I've read it in different versions that don't even say hunting soul. And I'm like, okay, so it's metaphorical, right? It's definitely, it has to be metaphor. It's metaphorical. Don't make this any more than what it is. It's metaphorical, man. But then I keep coming back to this thing that it's like, all right, people are saying that they're having these experiences where they're seeing entities. I don't want to say aliens because that puts a connotation on that I don't want to say it is. I don't want to say demon because these entities. There's something in another realm that has technology, and people are saying that they're seeing this technology, whether it's magical technology or a machine that's sucking souls or trapping souls. I even had JR and Shelly in studio. This was like last year or two. And I think I remember her talking about this whole thing where she saw these people in her backyard. Like, it was like, I don't know if it was an actual, if it was that she saw it in this realm, or she was like in what I call the portal bridge, and she saw this, like, she wasn't somewhere else, but she wasn't here, and she saw this activity. But she saw them a line of people that they were walking onto a craft, and if they're just going, and then going back to this lady that I talked to yesterday, I had this feeling. I was like, what if this technology, because they said that you're not supposed to be here. Like, how'd you get here? And then the buzzing, that's mechanical sounding to me, right? There are physical attributes. And I'm like, what if there's this technology they're using to graft this reality with another onto what I hate saying it because I just feel like it's corny, but I'm going to say, because I don't know how else to describe it. Graft it into a portal bridge where you're not existing on either plane, where this activity happens, even down to like real world problems like human trafficking. Could human trafficking, like I said about her, they were lining people and just walking them on. Could this stuff be happening in this liminal space? Brought it all back around, you know? So I just dumped a lot, but the reason why I dumped a lot is because like I said, I was like, maybe we're really having this biblical conversation. I was like, Ezekiel 13:18. And it's just, so I just dumped a lot on you guys, but.
I don't even know where to start. There's 100 directions I could go with this.
That's how I felt when I was listening to her. I was like, okay, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
You know, like, all right, let's start with your friends and their heads jerk back, I guess.
So I actually wanted to point that out because what's interesting is this experience, like walking through portal, UFO abductions, and sleep paralysis, all have common themes, right? And, you know, MUFON in the UFO world, they don't like this silly sleep paralysis stuff. They don't want.
They don't.
They don't want their, you know, their chocolate and our peanut butter, right? You know, they're bigger and better. They got better research. They're backed by more.
I'll take that bag then.
They don't want this. You ate pizza before you went to bed and smoked some pot, right? We're doing serious stuff here, but there's the similarity is that people are being taken.
Yeah.
Because that is my belief that that's what happened with sleep paralysis too. You're being abducted into the astral. Now, the one thing that I would ask this girl, especially since she said she was at a rave, is, was there an altered state of consciousness at play? Because that is the portal.
She said they were sober.
Okay.
They never got the drugs in them.
Interesting.
She did say they were sober.
So they had gone back. This is just a little factoid for fun.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that has always been noteworthy to me is that every time I woke up with sleep paralysis, and I've since asked other people very specifically, the position that you wake up in your bed, it's more times than not, you're in a supine position. You're laying on your back. Sometimes your back is arched, but what used to always kind of creep me out, and it was one of the ways that I would determine a nightmare versus the sleep paralysis, is when I would wake up and my neck would be craned all the way back on my pillow, as if your head's craned up. So when you said that kind of blew my mind. And I even saw a Netflix series once or something that I will never remember the name of. I don't know. And there was a situation where a boy was having like a sleep paralysis experience at night, and his mother or his grandmother would kind of come to him in this altered state of consciousness, and she would kind of like command him to get up and kill people and, you know, all this stuff. But she would always, when he was asleep, flip him over on his back and take her hand and shove his chin up. He was specifically poised in that position. And there's really bizarre physical side effects of these experiences. For example, nosebleeds is really common with people who have night terrors, just sporadically all the time in waking hours, that they're just always having these nosebleeds. And so I would pay attention to that kind of stuff, because it's the way the physical body is responding to the trauma. And where do I want to go? There's so much I want to say about this, Tony. There's so much going on. But when we were talking earlier about Trey, and I was saying I would really like to know about the attachments. And then we were also talking about people perishing for lack of knowledge. So we're all curious about these things. And in the situation of the story that you just told of the 41-year-old woman, and people who are abducted by aliens and who walk through these portals in the national forest, and the people with sleep paralysis, these are people that are being targeted and abducted. So they're not necessarily, they don't have any intent. They're not looking for it. In fact, a lot of them are wanting it to stop very badly. So for those who God has called for such a time as this into this type of ministry, I just want to put out a plea to people listening to this that, you know, we sit and listen to these podcasts and we see the shows and the documentaries. Everybody's not called to this at all. And if you don't have a calling, if you and your friends are just going to get a tent and some flashlights and go out into the woods because you think this is going to, you know, get some hits or whatever, you have no idea. And when we talk about attachments, I'm not talking about a couple of nightmares. Like, this woman, her story, one commits suicide, one goes into a mental institution. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Or we're talking about you come home with an attachment and your kids are now vulnerable. We're talking about physical illness that can come upon people. And so it's just a plea to all of those out there who maybe think this is a game. Oh, we're going to go ghost hunting. These things are not to be trifled with. But if you have a calling on your life to do it, and you're out there locating ancient marking stones and altars, and you have been given the power of God to locate them and break them. This is spiritual warfare at its most exciting, right? There are people out there doing the modern work of like Gideon, who got up in the middle of the night and cracked all of the high places down. And that came with consequences for Gideon as well, right? So I just think that her story really highlights the danger involved in this, that even when you aren't looking for it. So even more so for those people who are looking for it, if you're looking for it, it should be that you have a very unique calling on your life. You have those giftings, and most importantly, you have the protection of God over your life as you're doing this. Because, we've all seen too many movies. It's not that you're going to bust open a portal and, millions of aliens are going to come out into planet Earth and start shooting us all up and stuff, right?
I wish.
I got a story for you.
I dare you.
I got a story for you.
Yeah. What was I thinking telling Tony Merkel that? Bad metaphor.
I could just sit and tell you the stories that I've heard just this week on the recordings I've done, because what you just said is literally a story that I had a guy sitting here in studio, and he's a well-known person. He's like, his interview is going to be aired, I think, on December 3rd. Yeah, what you just said is pretty much what he described happening.
I'd like to retract that
for
statement.
2 nights in a row.
Yeah, you were talking about the souls being moved in the astral, right? Or the astral body being moved around. Tony brought it up. And it really made me think about some research I've been doing recently. And I just did an episode called REM cloning. And it started really with me listening to a lot of people's stories over the past few years and what's happened to them when it comes to their consciousness being transported into another physical body or physical form. And we're seeing that uptick big time over the past few years. And I use the term REM cloning because that's actually a term that was used by a guy named Donald Marshall, who came out in 2011. And most people discredited him, me included, because when he first came out, I am always skeptical, especially when somebody catches fire the way he did. And everybody was just really on board. And I'm also very skeptical when people are using a lot of very common buzzwords like Illuminati and Freemasons and Queen Elizabeth II and the Clintons. And when you see the typical buildup, I start questioning what's the motivation behind it. Now, I'm not saying that I believe everything that Donald Marshall has to say even now, but I do think there's more validity to some of the stuff he was saying back then when I'm now looking at a lot of what people are going through now. So what he said was going on was, and just brief synopsis on his backstory, from age 5 until he was in his early 20s, essentially, he was in these cloning facilities with his family being cloned, and all kinds of other stuff I won't even talk about on air was going on to him. And he was meeting all these celebrities and their clone bodies, which again, that was another red flag for me, where I wasn't sure if I really believed him, because we've heard that line of thinking for a long time too, that a celebrity dies, they replace them with a clone, and it goes so forth. Or if they're not doing what they're told to do, then they just replace them. And I'm not saying that that might not be possible, because I leave anything open to the realm of possibility in this weird world. But I'm very skeptical when it comes to some of that line of thinking when it's all encompassing that. And, he said that he wrote songs for all of these famous musicians from Rihanna to Lana Del Rey, all these different ones, which was another red flag for me too. So he's this genius music writer or whatever. And the version of him that we see in the videos, he even says is a clone version. He's a clone. So he's not even the real version of himself. So that all came out around 2011. And I'm super skeptical, and I had been for a while. And I want to say even just a few years ago, I did an episode where I was talking about Donald Marshall, and I was very skeptical in the episode. But with all of this stuff happening, with people talking about their consciousness being transported via entities, typically grays, you'll see them part of the mix, or reptilians, your classics, right? I went back to review some of the stuff he was talking about. And he talks about these 4 different types of clones. You got a Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4. The only one we'll talk about is the Mark 2 clones. He said are REM clones. He said these clones are created to, when they put you to sleep, or when you go to sleep, they will transport your consciousness out when you're in REM sleep. Only in the REM state consciousness, they can transport you out, move you into another body that's another clone of yourself, he said, which is the most applicable because of the DNA that you have. That clone's going to have the same DNA, so your consciousness will work better. But he said that they can't transport your consciousness into other bodies. He said, but the further off that DNA or blood type is from you, then the crazier you might go inside of that body if it's not parallel to what your normal body is. So he goes into a whole deep, dark synopsis on what that means as far as this REM state of moving your consciousness out when you're in REM sleep. And all I thought about when I was reading that was stories you've told, stories that Fringe has told, all these other people that have been on your show and countless other shows in the past few years that talk specifically about consciousness being moved via entities into other bodies for space missions, for
20 and backs,
all that.
Yeah.
So that really set me off on to start thinking that Donald Marshall's one of a couple things, right? Either he was MK Ultra'd into saying all this stuff, because I do think there's something going on there, or he was put out there to release some of this information. It might not all be true, but man, I'm believing more of what he said back then now than I ever did back then, where I'm really taking on board this idea of being able to move your consciousness out, specifically during this REM state, and then forcing you to do whatever these entities want you to do.
I think that even if you just look at it like on the reverse end of it, maybe it's not so hard to fathom if you're somebody who, listens to podcasts like this or whatever, and you hear people talk about going and doing astral projection. That's the individual willingly putting themselves, a piece of themselves, out of body. So if you're willing to say, okay, that's a reality, that's acceptable. I mean, and even, from the biblical end, we know that's definitely isn't the Bible. Who's to say then that there are other beings and entities that can do it against your will? If you can do it willfully, then we know it's possible. So who's to say that there's other beings in the cosmos that can do it against your will? Maybe that's a way to maybe kind of digest it in a way that's like, oh, well, maybe, like that's my thing. Is like, I just want people to try to have an open mind with stuff. Like you don't have to believe everything that's said on these podcasts, but it's like, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that something's not going on. Maybe even the person relaying the message doesn't have a clear image. Like maybe the person who has the experience doesn't totally have the clear visual as to what actually happened to them, but something happened to them. And if you can start there, maybe it's more palatable. What were you going to say? I know I kind of cut you off there. Oh my
gosh. I just want to corroborate everything both of you guys both just said, because I've been saying for years, sleep paralysis is the worst term ever. It's not indicative of what's happening to people. Everybody is paralyzed at certain phases of sleep, or we'd be wetting the bed and sleepwalking and punching people. And so there's nothing phenomenal or supernatural about states of sleep where our body goes into a form of paralysis. And so I look at it like there's astral projection and there's astral abduction.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is there's people that have intent and desire, and there's people who have no intent or desire, and they're getting pulled there against their will. And this REM cloning happening in REM sleep, this is one of the things that is the hardest for me to convince people of, and especially hard to convince sleep paralysis sufferers of, because we believe the narrative that we're waking up in our bedroom.
Mm.
Here's where these experiences are very similar to the UFO experience, as well as the story that Tony just cited with this woman where they woke up in their beds. When people have the UFO experience, many times they have no memory whatsoever of what happened. The clue is missing time. So you lose that advantage in sleep paralysis because when you go to bed, you typically do it for enough hours where when you wake up, you're not questioning where you were. If there's a fragment of a memory of anything, you will chalk it off to a bad dream. And my experience, and this goes 47 years of continual sleep paralysis, not just once or twice, or that one time, in high school when, I drank too many Jolt Colas. This happened repeatedly, right?
I haven't heard Jolt in a while.
I know, man. I had to give a shout out to us Gen Xers, right?
Yeah.
But here's the deal. My sleep paralysis experiences always started in REM because I would be having a dream. And then this is also a correlation with the lady's story, a buzzing sound.
Mm.
You don't see anything. No one's talking. Nothing. You're in the middle of the dream. You're just trying to get your locker open or and then all of a sudden you hear the buzzing and then terror just moves from the toes all the way up. And it's almost like as the terror is moving, it's spreading that paralysis. And you're usually very conscious of what's going on. Oh no, not again. Oh, here they come, something like that. And then in the dream, you're like, Jesus, help me. Jesus, help me. And then bam, you're awake in your room with this sleep paralysis experience. And so I really want to try to persuade people who've had this experience their whole life, as scary as it is to face the possibility, to consider that there are aspects of that dream. There are things that happened between the dream going bad and you saying, Jesus, help me, and waking up that, like UFO abductees, you do not remember.
Mm.
There are things that happened. They didn't pull you in the astral realm just to say boo and scare you and wake you up and giggle. These are nefarious beings with an agenda.
So could there be clues then on that line of thinking that, okay, I don't remember what happened, but in this waking world of whatever this reality is, could there be clues that they could look at, not as to what happened, but maybe it's like, ever since that happened, I've been having, random bouts of anger,
yes,
or heartburn or something, like all of a sudden you can date things back and like, okay, so maybe whatever I'm experiencing right now, if I think back to it, it kind of all started around the time that I had that weird experience. And then all of a sudden it might be some kind of clue. Cause that's the thing that I hope that we can help people accomplish, is like piecing these puzzle pieces together for not just a broad picture of everything that we talk about, but for their individual lives. Like, what's the blueprint for them to kind of get sanity?
This is how clever they are. They're so clever. A lot of times they target people who already have had a lot of trauma.
Mm.
That way, when all of the manifestations, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual manifestations of trauma show up, you have something else to point to. Well, I was given up as a baby, or, I was abused, or, what, in my case, I was in the hospital for 15 years with reconstructive surgery. And so when everything that's happening to you completely makes sense, you keep blaming it on the traumatic event. And so you're never going to pinpoint that they're masking the same symptoms so that you'll never figure out it's actually over here. They're creating a diversion. And so I even think the whole sleep paralysis experience is a diversion. You're waking up from an astral encounter where you were probably interfacing with spiritual beings. God only knows what sort of covenants were being made, or rituals or ceremonies were happening, what sort of agreements were being made. You're waking up with no memory of it, just like the UFO abductees. You've got this whole, Men in Black little magic flashlight, and you don't remember anything. So you wake up with no cognitive memory of the dream, air quotes, right? But your body remembers, and your body is giving you every single clue that it's in a high adrenaline fight or flight state. Your heart is pounding. You are on your back in defensive positions. All the saliva in your mouth is dried up. You're terrified. And so I really don't think the shadow man or the things that we're seeing in our room are doing much of anything but creating the diversion. That's why I'm scared. That entity in my room is why all the saliva is dried up, and why I'm, having trouble breathing, and why I'm terrified, and why my heart is pounding. And I've had this experience before where my heart is pounding so hard that my bed's actually moving.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And it's not vibrational. It's not like some people, like the beds will shake and stuff. It's not like this, exorcist kind of a shake, but my heart will be pounding so hard that I can feel the impact. And so it's a terror beyond anything. And I'm starting to realize, oh, that was a diversion. So now I run around and I tell everybody, I saw a shadow man in my room and it was so scary. No, I think that we are in the astral realm. We're being abducted in the REM state because they need certain states of consciousness. And you're in your bed. If someone came into your room, they would see you there. And you might not even be thrashing around or acting like you had a bad dream at all with sleep paralysis. With night terrors, you would. And that actually makes sense to me, Joel. I'm glad you said that, because that's a piece that didn't make sense to me. Like, we're just disembodied. And but if they're actually putting you into some sort of astral version of yourself, that makes sense.
It's interesting that we're talking about this, because just today, and I didn't listen to the episode, it was a reel on Instagram, Blurry Creatures put out with Fritz Zimmerman, and it's just the clip, and I think the episode's called Giants or something like that, but they were talking about these geographical landmarks that were made, and you can only see it from above, whether it's a circle or a square. And Nate said something almost like a clarifying thing. He's like, so they take I don't want to say spirit, because I don't think he said spirit, but he's like, and they put it in this house it in this biological body. And so they were talking about it too, about, I guess, assuming something to do with ancient technology that we're coming across here and stuff. So this is a concept that is being discussed right now, and it's a very old thing, apparently. I mean, anything that's happening in the astral and stuff, it's obviously ancient. I had a guy on the show. I had it pulled up here. Let me just episode 667. I called it Walking into Dream Realms, and I'm pretty sure it's this guy. He said that when he's in this astral realm, when he's coming back to his body, I think he said every time there is some kind of entity at his body waiting, almost like it's trying to prevent him from getting back to his body. And that takes me down to the road of Pastor Dave Bryan talking about, everybody talks about it, right? But he specifically talks about how they prayed and during spiritual warfare that the silver cord would be cut for Anton LaVey, and he died. So like, are these entities trying to prevent people from getting back to their body to kill them? It's just, you know, as somebody who's never done any of this stuff, I don't think I've ever had any kind of sleep paralysis. You know, I don't remember being abducted. I just talk to people who have, you know, like I venture into these concepts and I start thinking like, man, like, is it that sinister? Like my wife's uncle, when we were dating, we'd just gotten engaged, and I was meeting her dad for the first time. And we go and we have dinner, and he's like, I want to, you know, your Uncle Mike, you know, would love to see you, and you know, all this stuff. So we're scheduling to meet Uncle Mike. This is when I just met her dad. A few weeks later, Uncle Mike dies, and he dies in his sleep. And apparently he wasn't the most healthy person, but it wasn't expected. Like I don't think they were expecting the guy to die. Now, I'm not saying Uncle Mike was killed by an entity, right? But it's things like that, those kind of situations where people they just died in their sleep. They just didn't wake up. And it makes you wonder, was there something happening on a spiritual level that we see the physical realm have the immediate repercussions of, you know?
Yeah. So I'm going to be a little vague here to keep all of my sources silent, but in another country, there is a entity that can be summoned, and it's not summoned easily. It requires blood sacrifice. So there's whole rituals involved, and it's a very specific entity that has a name that I'm not going to say. And it's specifically summoned to target men in their sleep who have not just come to Christ, but who have decided to be pastors or preachers. They've decided to go to seminary. They've decided, I'm going to start Christianizing the nation, right? And these men very specifically die of their sleep of heart attacks. So they don't wake up, they're found in their bed, and when the autopsy or the whatever is done, it's determined that it was a cardiac event, right? And so I could say more about it because it's a fascinating story that would intrigue listeners, but I'm not telling this for the story of intrigue. The reason I'm telling it is because here in America, where we don't value, appreciate, believe, or take seriously supernatural or demonic interference in our lives, like they don't exist, and you know, whatever, that's the belief. And so even if this was happening right and left, our culture would never allow for that explanation. It wouldn't be examined, and it certainly wouldn't be considered. It would be, you know, a cardiac event. And so I just want your listeners to be aware of the fact that there are places in the world where people who absolutely know what they're doing, know the rituals, they know the specific names of these entities, and they are targeting people. But I don't think it's limited to only people who are dying in their sleep.
I got a question for you on that note, because I've been thinking about some of this stuff recently about entities that are in the specific job of taking out Christians, maybe in said manner. I know I've had several people reach out to me asking questions about this, and I know how I personally think about it, but I'm curious what you think, and you, Tony, about this idea. So you brought up earlier people that are called to specifically go against this type of thing. And I think those are specific people. They either have had backgrounds in the occult and they're out of it now and they understand it, or it's people that have a level of intrigue that's healthy, but know what they're going up against because they feel like they have the power of God to be able to do that. I think that's part of my answer personally, but then there's this other side too, where God has to be allowing these people to die, essentially, for these entities to come through and be able to do that. I think some listeners may want to know, where does the power of God come into play to stop that? Where is God's power more powerful than the entity? Because some baby Christians will probably be scared hearing that there are old gods that, through the performance of rituals by people who are connected to the occult, who would be able to take out a person who was called to preach or felt like they were called to preach. Well, they may think that they would be subject to the same attacks. And where does the power of God come into play to be able to be bigger than that? Because I know all three of us at this table believe that God's more powerful than these entities and that he can supersede that. Is there something those people are doing to allow themselves to be open to that attack that they wouldn't normally be doing? Or is it God's allowing it to open people's eyes to the fact that this is going on? I think there's got to be some level of God being the most high, right? You know, it talks about it specifically in the Bible, and they're not talking about God's bigger than you watching football 3 times a week. They're talking about old gods. They're talking about Elohim. They're talking about these fallen entities. So if that's the case, where does God come into play, and what is his purpose in allowing that to happen? Because I feel like that there are people that may be either considering Christianity or are Christians that don't understand this stuff like we do. To them, that's a frightening concept of, well, if I go to sleep, if someone performs a ritual and this entity comes to me in the astral and kills me, well, where does God come into play if I know that God is all powerful and he's connected with me? Where do I have the power within myself with the Holy Spirit to be able to combat that? And I think that for me, I know how I feel about it, but I'm curious what you guys think about that specific line of thinking.
I think I'll let you think about it a little bit, because my brain is running. So I think my response is not a happy response. I'm very, I approach my life in a way where I say God can do whatever the heck he wants. He can allow whatever he wants, and I'm nothing special, right? So I'm going to start with, it's cool that I'm really bad at remembering scripture. I'm really bad at it. And I'm getting better, because I remembered it was Isaiah 57, and I turned to it and I was right because it was highlighted already. It says, good people pass away, the godly die before their time, but no one seems to care or wonder why. No one seems to understand that God is protecting them from the evil to come. For those who follow godly paths will rest in peace when they die. And that's not a direct answer to that, right? But it's something that was very impactful to me, because I was like, so many times people want to throw that up as to why God isn't good, or we don't believe in God because, you know, if God was real, why did my grandmother pass the way she passed? And it's like, a lot of times we don't have an answer because we don't know the word, right? And man, this happened when last time I talked about this too. I'm just trying to make sure I don't cry. My mom is what? It's just affected me, you know. My mom is one of the best people I know, hands down. And it's tough. And so I really don't, I don't make a habit of putting my business out there, because I'm kind of like East Coast kind of guy a lot. I'm like, it's none of your business. Leave me alone. It's my life. But the older I get, the more wimpy I get. And I find myself getting choked up at Disney movies when the dad says, I love you to the kid with the music playing, you know? Like, ever since I had the kids, like I'm more emotional. And I feel like something, I got a pass. Like I got a scar. Everybody says has scars, and I'm no different. And I think something from just my life past before podcasting, I learned how to bury emotions. And I always operated in the sense that I need to be a killer because one day I might need to kill kind of attitude. When I had kids, that switch got turned off in a sense, you know, like it was almost like God said, hey, if you ever need to kill, that's always going to be there, dude. Chill, you know? So anyways, there's a long way to get around to the fact that why I'm getting all emotional right now, because my mom, since she's been younger than me, has been dealing with chronic health issues. And for over 20 years, going on 30 years, the doctors can't tell her what it is, why. It's always, if it's not this, it's something else. And I'm not talking it's in her head. I'm talking like at times she's walking with canes. She's in the hospital. They don't know why she's bleeding. They don't know where the blood went, all this stuff. And in this, people I know could say, I don't understand why my mom, she's such a good person and she follows the Lord. She's the person I call when I need prayer because I know she's actually going to do it. Like, why her? And I just come back to saying, good people die before their time. And we don't know why God operates the way God operates. And it's none of our business. If he says it's none of our business. So there's that to what you were saying, right? But then I also jotted down here, if you guys see me typing, so like you guys are saying things, I just put down words so I remember. I think there's also the aspect of what we were talking about earlier, the spiritual realm, the supernatural realm being so real, and modern Western Christianity not even seeing it. Casualties of war. Like, we are in a war, a real tangible war. And we see that play out in real time. And I think it could be as simple as, again, not knowing, casualties of war. And I keep bringing this up, and it's crazy because I preached at my church for the first time on the 29th of September. And I preached about spiritual warfare, and I used Daniel 10. And I felt like going into that church on Sunday, I was bringing a message for the churchgoers, the people at the church, the congregation. I have used that sermon more in the last month and a half than I have ever could have imagined. And we'll use it again today, because it's a great understanding for the spiritual realm. When Daniel received the vision, he needed understanding. He entered into prayer. That prayer lasted for 3 weeks. And it wasn't prayer and fasting. And it wasn't until the angel appears before him and says, I would have been here sooner, but for the last 21 days, 3 weeks, I've been held up by the Prince of Persia, And it wasn't until Michael the Archangel came and intervened on my behalf that I could get a way to get to you. And this is an image, this is a picture of what's happening beyond this realm. There's an actual tangible war going on, to the point that this angel for 3 weeks was held up and couldn't get to Daniel to answer his prayer. So if you take that and you put it into a more physical idea, could there be such a spiritual real war going on that the angels can't get to everybody to save? And is it because, it's simply because, and this is what I believe, I don't care if anybody else doesn't believe it, it's fine. It's this spiritual warfare going on, the way it's going on, the way it's unfolding. It's because God designed it that way. He designed spiritual warfare for our active participation. Mm. He designed it for us to be participants in this war. And it is a war. There are going to be casualties in war. There was a real rebellion that happened. There were angels that were so caught up and swept up that they thought it was a good idea to rebel against the Almighty. And within that, imagine the ego that's there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, imagine the ego of every one of them. And to think that of all this time, that those beings don't war with each other. They all hate God. But to say that they don't jockey for position is ridiculous. I think this war has levels to it, right? And I just feel like we have a blueprint as to what our role is with this warfare. And it doesn't mean that our role is going to be like the hymnal, Victory in Jesus, right? It doesn't mean that every second of this war is going to be victory in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I could be wrong, and I'm fine being wrong on all that. But I would say this, and I'm going to say this, and I wasn't planning on saying this, but the first time I talked to you, and I don't even know if this is answering anything you said, Joel, but I'm just going, so feel free. But like, the first time I talked to you, and if this dovetails off, I want to circle back to the topic, but you opened my eyes and my wife, to the point that my wife made a rare appearance with you, right, for that overtime recording, to the realities of positioning within the household. And we're lucky enough to have your dad here in studio, and you talked about your dad on that recording. So your dad is an intercessor for your behalf, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something I never considered for my wife or my kids, the way, until you, like, I did, but not the way you described it, right? Mm-hmm. And especially for my wife, the fact that I could protect my wife in the dream realm through interceding on her behalf, especially with any kind of contracts that could have been made that she doesn't even remember. And taking it to the kids, they're sweet. They're kids. Why, right? We're in war. Mm-hmm. We're in war. That's why. My kids in the last month and a half have been targets of war. They just have been. And here I go again. Mm-hmm. I am not fearful. I am not angry. I approach this very matter-of-factly. The reason why my kids have been attacked is because we're in war. And what I'm doing is making an impact in the war, and they're trying to come at me through my children. There's a reason why I'm the one out of everybody in my house, out of the people that come on the show. There's a reason why I'm the one that gets hit the least at my house. Let's just keep it at the house. They come after my kids. They come after my wife. They try to hit me that way because they know they're not going to hit me by hitting me. Yeah. And so My son, my daughter had a very tangible thing happen to her. I'm going to keep it very general. And she's 4. Just turned 4 in August. She had a very tangible thing happen to her in her room at night in the middle of one of the worst weeks of my life. In the moment of some of the strong, literally moment. I'm not talking about moment like, oh, that week, which was crazy, but the moment where the spiritual warfare was hitting like a peak, she's attacked. Just on the other side of the wall from me. I was right there. And so like, I know there was these hits that were like, we're going to hit where it hurts, and we're going to try to make you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. And then my son, like this week or last week, I can't remember, he was hit not in the tangible way like my daughter was, where it was like here. It was here where she was hit. My son was hit in the dream realm. And what my son dreamt was my son dreamt about things that only exist on my show, in a sense, right? He doesn't listen to my show. He even told his teacher, his teacher said, what does your dad do for a living? And he's like, he's a podcaster. And he spilled the beans. And he's like, but you can't listen to it unless you're 20 or older. Because that's what I tell him. I said, I don't want my kid listening to the show, like, but he detailed things from his dream that are from my show. And it was them telling me, we're coming for your kid and there's nothing you can do about it. And we're going to do it in a way that you know it's us,
Mm-hmm.
And so taking it back, I look at my life right now and I don't care what anybody has to say about anything anymore. I don't care. And I was talking to Joel about yesterday. Like any episode that people hear, it's because it's a conversation that I enjoyed or I feel is impactful. And I don't care what anybody has to say about anything anymore, because this isn't story time with Tony anymore like it used to be. This is a show that is changing people's lives. And because of that, I'm in my own life going through spiritual warfare that I've never could have imagined. And I don't come on the show all the time to talk about it because it's not your business. And maybe it is, but if God has to humble me on it or whatever, because I don't have any desire to come on the show and talk about this stuff on a weekly basis. I just don't. But I look at my life and it's been a growing movement in this direction. And right now we're in like accelerator mode. I look at my life, I look at myself like I'm a soldier in a war, and I act like that. So when something bad happens around me that I wish didn't happen, or I feel like, man, God, you could have made that one swerve, man. I'm just like, it's war. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have casualties. Mm-hmm. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to keep marching on that front line. And so with what you said 30, 40 minutes ago, that's my answer. Mm-hmm. Your turn.
Beautiful. Beautiful answer. Before I answer, and I'm going to, Tony, just so you know, with the hundreds and hundreds of sleep paralysis experiences I had, I've forgotten more of them than I remember. And I just remember little details. I don't even know if I could fill a book with the things that I remember. but I remember the first one that I had memory of. Now, things might have happened before that, but the first one I remember was 4 years old. I remember the bedroom. I remember the bedroom carpet, the olive green shag carpet there in Willow Grove. And it was sort of an out-of-body experience as well, too. I was able to I was still in my bed, but I remember like running to the door and the door slamming. And I remember a disembodied voice in my head slamming the door. And they said, your parents can't hear you scream. And even if they could, they wouldn't help you. They don't care about you. And you know what? I don't remember what sort of psychological or spiritual effect that had on my emotions or my anxiety or my depression or my, feelings of loved in the home or whatever. But I will tell you, it was all talk. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
They were ineffective in all of their threats. They come and they pick on little kids. And the fact of the matter is, I didn't have enough life experience or understanding. I didn't know what spiritual warfare was. I went to Sunday school. I knew there was a God and a devil and a Jesus. And it was enough that I trusted in the Lord. I knew to call on the name of Jesus. And even though I was a stupid little kid, He protected me through all of it. Their words were empty. Their threats were empty. And when you're on the other side of the wall, Jesus is on the other side of the wall with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where we just trust in the Lord. But
Can I, before you go any further, I just want to
Please.
complete one more thought that I had with that, because more for the audience sake than anything. When that happened to my son recently, I was brushing my teeth in the morning, getting ready to leave the house, take him to school. Lindsay tells me, you need to talk to Ben about his dream. And I was like, oh, here we go. What's going on? Basically she told me before we even left, and I told her, I said, when I drop him off, I'm coming home and I'm going to handle this. And she and Gemma left the house, and I waged war, and I anointed every doorway, window in my house. Like, my house is dripping in oil right now. It is slippery. Okay. No diddy. So, but like, I prayed over the house, I prayed over the kids, everything. No, sometimes
I'm just thinking about cops showing up at your house and you're like, God told me, He told me to buy all this oil.
Oh man. But I prayed over the house a ton, right? And Ben is like his mom, were lucid dreaming. I'm pretty sure he has. It's fairly often. And the very next day after this event, I asked him. I said, "Hey, how'd you sleep last night?" He's like, "Good." And he didn't wake me up or anything, so I was okay. Slept through the night. And he goes, "I don't even remember any of my dreams last night." And I was like, praise God. Like, it was almost an extreme answer to prayer, because like Ben remembers his dreams like his mom does. And like, he's also highly intelligent. Like, he's in like special education because he's so stinking smart. And like, he communicates on a different level than he's not even 76 still. But he's like, yeah, I don't even remember my dream last night. And I was like, awesome. And then it was this week, actually, because then yesterday, I think it was, I asked him again, and it's the same thing. Yeah, I don't remember my dreams. And so like, I guess maybe my prayer should be moving forward, God, only let him remember dreams that they're from you and you have something to tell him. Period. End of story. So anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry. I feel like I hijacked things there, but it's just when you were saying that, it just started triggering all this emotion in me, dude. I'm sorry.
No apologies. So going back to Joel's original assertion, first of all, I just want to say I'm so in my element right now. I mean, I kind of feel like I heard the best sermon I've heard in 20 years in the last 30 minutes, because we don't hear those sort of things anymore. And so I just want to commend you, Joel, for asking a super hard question. Where's God in all this? I have friends who are survivors of SRA, and I ask them all the time, why is why does it look like the devil's always winning? Why can't we just integrate these altars? And why can't we, like, what is going on? Like, I struggle with it, right? So I just commend you for asking a really hard question. And then I commend you, Tony, for answering it and not trying to sugarcoat it. Or, we're constantly trying to make God look like this super nice, relatable human being. And the fact of the matter is, we don't get it. And maybe in heaven, we'll never get it. God's never going to fully reveal his whole mind to us. We wouldn't comprehend it anyway, right? There's always going to be a disparity between his knowledge and ours. But what I really liked about the angle that you took on it, I love the whole we're in a war angle on it. And I think a big reason why a lot of kind of pew-warming evangelicals are not going to recognize the Messiah when he comes back, and they're going to perhaps fall for the wrong one, is the Messiah that's coming back is not going to be politically correct. He's going to be, a toxic male. He's going to be on a war horse. He's going to have a sword. Blood is going to get shed. We're not getting man bun Jesus a second time. He came in the first century. We heard it was love and mercy. He came as the shepherd. That's not the guy that's coming back. And so I'm totally on board with seeing our lives as a commissioned soldiers. Even the language of go into all the world and preach the gospel, the great commission, that's military language, He didn't leave us a love letter. He left us a commission. And so I want to talk a little bit about the sovereignty of God in suffering. And I 100% believe that even when people die and they die young and they're in the midst of their pursuits, and they were godly pursuits and wonderful people who get sick or who suffer, I really want to make it abundantly clear that I believe God is sovereign in everything. Now, that doesn't mean he's up on his throne, slapping his knee and laughing hysterically, or there's no empathy there. I think that's the whole reason that Jesus came in the form of a human being. He truly had he had the full gamut of emotions and experiences, and he went to funerals and he saw sick people. But anyway, the sovereignty of God in suffering. Why does it happen? Why do such good people suffer? Even when you pray and fast for their healing. And, in my own case, why was I born with a birth defect? Why did I have 15 years of surgery and get teased by kids in school and whatever? Well, I can tell you now in retrospect, it was a crucible. And it was hard. And when you're 5 years old, 10 years old, 16 years old, you don't understand. And you do struggle. You have to work out your faith with fear and trembling when you're doing everything to walk with God and trust him and love him. And it doesn't seem in your childlike mind that he's being nice to you. How come all the pretty girls are getting how come it's so easy for them, And in working out my faith with fear and trembling, I now have attributes as an adult that have equipped me for the ministry God has called me in that I would not otherwise have been able to handle if I hadn't been walking into operating rooms and getting all of the needles and this and that. And so when I look at 1 Peter and it says, do not be surprised at the fiery trials when they come upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. Don't be surprised, Christian. Like, why are you surprised? Why are you questioning my goodness and I've told you that this is going to happen, but this is one of the things that I marvel at. When we suffer and we don't curse God, and on a daily basis, if not a moment-to-moment basis, as we're fighting chronic pain or trauma or heart-crushing disappointment over a loss or of some kind, when we work through that with our doctrine and our affections intact, loving Him with our heart, soul, mind, and strength again. When our heart, soul, mind, and strength are still united at the end of the day, that, hey, even though I'm sick, even though I'm broke, even though I've been unemployed, even though, I've got the birth defect or so-and-so died, if we can receive the heavy hand of God's sovereignty and still love Him and trust Him and long for His coming, there will be an eternal experience for us that will be different than the people that didn't suffer as much. It's like when Jesus told the guy, who was condemning him for, like, if you knew how filthy that woman was, you would, wouldn't be touching her. And He's like, who's going to love me more? He who's been forgiven little or forgiven much, right? He who suffers much is going to experience the glory of Jesus Christ in a greater depth for eternity. I believe, we can talk all day about crowns that we're going to get and things like that. For me, what I'm looking forward to is when I get to heaven, I want to see how all of my suffering and my sorrow and my disappointment and the rejection translates into my capacity to house and delight in the glory of Jesus Christ. And so the more I suffer, like, I always use the example of, like, if every time we suffer, we're like shoveling a scoop of dirt, throughout the course of a lifetime of suffering, we will have dug a channel. And if the glory of the Lord is water being filled into that channel, I don't want a kiddie pool. I want an ocean. And so what's temporary and transient, we want God's favor and love for us to translate into wealth, prosperity, long life, happiness. And He wants all those things for us, but He wants them for eternity, not just now. It's this fleeting, And I do believe Psalm 27, I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I have. I've seen a lot of the goodness of God, even despite my suffering. But Christians need, like Paul, we need to take it from Paul. Paul boasted in his sufferings, not because he was better than other people or he thought he was tougher, but because maybe he understood that was achieving something greater than the praise of man, or the fill in the blank, the job promotion you want, or the spouse you want, or the nice house you want, or whatever. We have all these things that we think will fill that hole and make us happy. So we have to start looking at suffering. It's not always discipline or punishment. It's not always the litmus test to determine God's favor for us. And in fact, sometimes, if you look at the Hall of Fame and the book of Hebrews, people of whom the world was not even worthy of, and they all died before they got the promise. How do you make sense of that, right? So I just, I'm speaking from personal experience. Tony, you were talking earlier about how you learn to cut off your emotions from things, and in order to survive, right? I'm not going to let anyone hurt my feelings. I'm not going to, let anyone see my emotion. I'm going to keep my cards close to the vest. And I did a lot of that as well for survival sake. But when I saw it through a different perspective, that the rod of the Lord is every bit as loving and sovereign as the staff. Your rod and your staff comfort me. The rod, the shepherd used it to keep those sheep in line. The rod of the shepherd comforts me? What? Why would getting a spanking you be a comfort? That hurts. I'm getting whacked. But the rod is equally a sign of his love and his presence. And we have to stop judging our own life as well as the life of our Christian friends. You cannot use how much garbage is going on in someone's life or how much suffering as a means of where God's at in his favor for that person. And I just absolutely believe that suffering, this is to go off of the heels of your analogy of this being a war, Tony, which I completely resonate with. I think our suffering is going to be the Purple Hearts. That those are going to be all of the Purple Hearts that we get when we get in heaven. And when I see the stuff in Scripture that talks about the crowns of rejoicing and the crowns of the martyr and whatever, I always see that more as like a medal ceremony, where you're getting those Purple Hearts and those stars of valor and stuff pinned on your chest. Like you went through the war, you got shot at, you bled a little bit, you were in the triage unit. We've all been stuck in the triage tent for a while, trying to recover from those wounds. And I just want to encourage any listeners out there, there's a lot of shame and confusion when we're in the triage tent, when we've got knocked down and we're sort of incapacitated for a while, and everyone around us is still doing their ministry and they're succeeding, and all their podcasts are getting views and they're getting the promotions, and we're sitting here in this state of sort of uselessness, and a lot of condemnation comes to us at that time. And I just want to encourage listeners that if you're in that triage tent right now, licking your wounds and recovering from a heavy blow dealt against you, it's just part of being a soldier. Sometimes you're in that triage tent. If there's no shame in it, just allow Jesus to come in and nurse you back to health. You'll be stronger for it. Don't be anxious to get out of there before the wounds have healed. The great healer, our holy healer, he knows how long those bandages have to be on there. And sometimes we're in that tent a lot longer than we want to be. But that is not an indictment of how strong or weak you are. It takes a lot of strength to humble ourselves and stay in that triage tent when we've been battle scarred. But one day, man, we're going to be bragging about our scars in heaven someday, because it makes Jesus look good. It made him look like he sustained us. He loved us. And the capacity to which we can maintain our faith and affections for Jesus Christ, the more battered we are, will be the capacity to which we will have a moment by moment, ever expanding experience of enjoying him forever.
Yeah, well, I like both your answers. Pretty good.
Welcome back, Joel, after an hour.
Hey, Joel's back.
It's great. You guys had some great answers, and I want to give you kind of what I've,
Should we just get a box of tissues?
Now I feel left out. I feel like a jerk.
I know. Tony and I are getting old. You're talking about crying at a Disney movie.
Yeah.
I took my son to go see The Wild Robot, and he and I both were bawling like the whole movie. Yeah, probably one of the greatest animated movies I've ever seen in my life. Great family movie. By the way, I'm plugging a movie. So, a couple things that I thought about were recently I was reading about Abraham, and I think that both of you are right with finding glory in the struggle, but I also want to uplift people and say that your goals and things that God has called you to do on this earth are obtainable. Mm-hmm. You can obtain even a massive level of success.
Sure.
According to God's will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes that when people are going through things, they don't see that. And we look at Abraham and, God took him out and showed him all that land and said, that's yours. And your children will be like the dust. And I think that's applicable to every single one of us in different ways, but we are all called in the same way that Abraham was called. And we have to take that. And the other thing I want to talk about is the armor of God. Part of the battle is understanding the armor and practice. What do soldiers do? They practice. They understand how to use the tools that are given to us. And I think sometimes that God allows things to happen to us. And when they do, if our armor's not where it needs to be, that's when things go awry as well. And sometimes it's to teach us a lesson. Maybe our pride or hubris has taken over and we think we're ready for whatever, and we're not. And that's to show us that. Sometimes it's what you said. You have these preachers that were taken out and maybe they weren't ready, or maybe God knew that when they gave their lives to him and that calling was there, that was the sacrifice that they had to make. And maybe that was to wake other people up to what was going on in that case. So then others who are called to do battle, to do war here, would be prepared because of that. We don't know the machinations of Yahweh. We don't know how all that works. And to your point, maybe we never do. But I think that we have to have a healthy level of balance of understanding the real battle that's going on. But at the same time, you just talked about victory. Victory is obtainable, even on this earth. Yes, when we get to wherever, and my biggest thing that I've been talking about now is let's know that heaven exists, but also know that it was not created for us, that earth was created for us. And this is where we're going to be long term in the end. So while everybody's like racing to get to heaven, earth was created for us to be stewards of. We still need to build here. Whatever we think about the end times, the earth is where we're going to be. God's going to create a new Jerusalem, a new earth. We're going to be right back here again.
Yep.
So we need to be prepared for that.
Back to ground zero.
To build here. And I think that through all the negative stuff that's going on, all the negative entities, we have to realize that there is a overwhelmingly positive that overshadows all of it. And to your point of man bun Jesus, well, that's the guy I talk to every day is man bun Jesus. I know he's got the artillery when it's time.
Yep.
And he's got the artillery that he shares with us to use here now. We just have to know how to use it. And I think that's how we get prepared for these things happening, even in the weird places like the astral realm. You and I talked about on the podcast we did a really strange dream that I had, which I don't think was really a dream. It was a series of events that happened in the astral. But the ability for me to understand even in there what was going on and for me to be able to operate out of it, I wouldn't have been able to do years ago. But that's because I understand the armor.
Ephesians 6.
Yep.
Should we bring it in for a landing? Let me look at my notes here. Do I hit everything? No, I was, you guys, listen, Vicki, when you came in here, you started talking about, or no, your dad started talking about Nathan Reynolds. And I was like, oh, let's just start going down Nathan Reynolds. I don't even think I'm going to do Nathan Reynolds today. We'll do Nathan Reynolds some other day. Nathan is a good guy. I like him. He's going to come out to the studio again. But yeah. I think that's a good way we're going to end it today. We're going to end it there and save the conversation for another day. Before we get out of here, Vicki, we didn't do this in the beginning, but tell people where they can get your book and where they can find you. And I'll mention it in the intro before this recording starts.
Sure, absolutely. My most recent book, They Only Come Out at Night, Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis, is available at lamarzulli.net. You can get me at vickijoyanderson.com and on Instagram and TikTok at vickijoyauthor.
Joel Thomas, you can get to anything that I do at Linktree/Joel Thomas Media, any of the music that I do, any of the podcasting that I do. But if you're looking to just get to the podcast, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of the other ones, and just type in Free the Rabbits. I do a host of different type of topics. I encourage people to look at information, but get out of the rabbit hole and go out inside and touch grass, because I think it's very important for us to connect to everyone around us and not live in this perpetual hole of despair all the time, because that's not why we were put on this earth to live.
And tell people about Spotify playlist, because that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so Spotify recently created an official Spotify playlist of my music. So you can go to Joel Thomas on Spotify and you'll find the playlist there, and it'll always have all the music that I create, and it'll generally every month it'll reposition the music there that I create. But yeah, it's just my music. So if you go there, follow that, you'll always get anything new that I have coming out, which next year is going to be a big year for me musically. I got a lot planned on that front. I'm working on several secret projects that Tony knows about, and a book may be involved in that process too. So I'll let everybody know what's going on there. But the best way to keep up with me is go to Joel Thomas Media at Linktree, because everything will be there. You can get to the music, the films that we do, which we're about to go shoot another film. We just shot a crazy film this summer, built around a ton of research I did on Aleister Crowley and his connection to cryptids. So it's going to be a blast. It's got Juan Ayala a part of it, Isaac Weishaupt, a bunch of big names in the field of occult research. So it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, just so people understand, like the Spotify playlist is something that Spotify has to do. It's not something you can just say, hey, Spotify, can you do? It's like, no, we find this person here good enough for us to design a playlist for them. So that's really cool. And anybody listening right now, Joel is the guy who does the outro music for this show. So we put it in the show notes. People don't read the show notes, I guess. And they're like always, hey, what's that song? It's always in the show notes. So if you just scroll into the description, whatever song you're listening to at the end of the show, it is linked there in the description of the episode. So guys, I appreciate you joining me. This was a freaking fun conversation. Just so the audience knows, we had a little text thread going. I had text Vicki and I said, what do you want to talk about? And like, oh, let me think about it. And then she texts Joel, what are we going to talk about? And then Joel texts me and I text them and I said, guys, we're just going to sit down and talk and we're going to see where it goes. And no agenda. And so it was a good conversation. Hopefully people enjoyed it. So thank you. Thank you very much. We're done.
I am alone, I am so cold, a rose in a cage. My petals are thrown into the wind, I'm left with no face. Cause when I scream, please hear my pain. Cause when I'm gone, I have no name. I am alone, I am so cold, a rose in a cage. My petals are thrown into the wind, I'm left with no face. Cause when I scream, please hear my pain. Cause when I'm gone, I have no name. I'm feeling so lost in this cage, I don't know who to blame. They use me when they wanna play, I'm just a puppet on the stage. I wonder if anyone outside can hear me. Maybe when the chalk is outlined sincerely, kill me so I can fade away. Feel me, you know what you gave away. I am alone, I am so cold, a rose in a cage. My petals are thrown into the wind, I'm left with no face. Cause when I scream, please hear my choose them for me. Dreaming of a noose every time they coming towards me. Who do I accuse? Is it you or who's before me? I'm clicking on my shoes, keep hoping that I'm Dorothy. These strings I did not choose, they choose them for me. Dreaming of a noose every time they coming towards me. Who do I accuse? Is it you or who's before me? I'm clicking on my shoes, keep hoping that I'm Dorothy. I'm alone, I am so cold, a rose in a cage. My petals are thrown into the wind, I'm left with no face. Cause when I scream,